The official report from the Corrections Department logged the escape at 4:17 hours, but the chaos had started much earlier. A trip silent alarm in the West Wing laundry facility, initially dismissed as a glitch in the aging system. Then a guard noticing a ventilation grate loose just enough to slide a man through. Then the frantic realization during the 4 o'clock count that inmate 734, Michael Jensen, was missing. Not just missing from his bunk, but gone, vanished into the pre-dawn murk surrounding the state penitentiary walls. Michael Jensen, serving 7 to 15 for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a bar fight gone south that left a man blind in one eye, wasn't considered maximum security. He was a quiet con, kept his head down, worked in the laundry. Nobody saw him as a flight risk. Until now, Lieutenant Harding, a grizzled veteran whose face seemed permanently etched with the cynicism of decades inside the system, stood by the gaping grate, a flashlight beam cutting through the stale air. "How the hell?" he muttered, more to himself than the sweating rookie beside him. The ductwork was narrow, filled with dust and the smell of old detergent. It led out, they quickly discovered, to an external vent near the perimeter fence, hidden behind a maintenance shed. A simple hacksaw, likely smuggled in piece by piece, was found discarded near the fence line. It wasn't sophisticated, just brutal efficiency, the kind born of desperation, not cunning. The news broke within hours, initially a small blip on the local radio, then exploding into a full-blown media frenzy. Escaped convict on the loose. The image splashed across every screen was his mugshot, a man with tired eyes, a receding hairline, and a faded tattoo peeking from his collarbone. Not the face of a hardened criminal, more like a guy who worked construction and drank too much on weekends. The public was told he was dangerous, a violent offender. But the real danger wasn't just that he was out, it was why he was out and where he was heading. Police units fanned out, roadblocks went up, the city tightened its breath. Jensen didn't have a car, no known contacts outside who weren't already on parole themselves. He was a ghost in the system, now a ghost in the streets. The immediate fear was random violence, a man on the run with nothing to lose. But the detectives assigned to the case, led by Detective Ramirez, a sharp woman who trusted instinct over procedure, started digging deeper. Why this inmate? Why now? Just 2 years into a minimum 7-year sentence. His record inside was clean. No disciplinary issues, no escape attempts, no gang affiliation. He was a model prisoner, paradoxically. They pulled his visitor logs, his phone records, heavily monitored but still a potential source of clues. His only regular visitor was his wife, Sarah Jensen. Her calls were mostly brief, mundane updates about bills, their tiny apartment, the weather. Nothing that screamed escape motive. But then Ramirez found it. A visitor log entry from 3 weeks prior. Not Sarah. A different name. A lawyer. Not his defense attorney from the original trial. A new one. A family lawyer. Listed reason for visit. Personal legal matter. Ramirez underlined it, a chill tracing down her spine. This wasn't about getting out of prison. It was about something that had happened while he was in. Something personal. Something that ripped through his quiet life and pushed him to crawl through suffocating ducts into the unpredictable night. The city held its breath, unaware that the escaped convict wasn't running from the law so much as running toward a reckoning. Toward the woman he loved, or thought he did. The first hours were critical. Police knew. Every minute the trail went colder. The chance of finding him diminished. They questioned the guards, the inmates who worked the laundry, anyone who might have seen something. Most offered nothing but blank stares or mumbled denials. The prison was a world of its own, and Jensen had just left it. But he hadn't left his rage behind. That he carried with him like a second skin. Michael Jensen's life before prison was a study in unremarkable stability. He worked construction, building houses in the rapidly expanding suburbs, his hands calloused and strong. He met Sarah at a local bar. She was a waitress, all sharp wit and weary smiles. They dated for 2 years, married in a small ceremony at the courthouse. Their life was simple. Rent payments, shared meals, nights on the couch watching TV. They talked about having kids someday, buying a house, the usual dreams of working-class couples. There were no grand passions, no explosive fights, just a quiet rhythm of two people building a life together. Michael wasn't a talker, not about his feelings anyway. He showed his love through action, fixing things around the apartment, making sure Sarah had enough money, rubbing her feet after a long shift. Sarah, in turn, managed their meager finances, kept their small space clean, and listened patiently when Michael occasionally vented about his boss or the ache in his back. Their biggest conflict before the incident was usually about money or Michael drinking too much on a Friday night. The bar fight that landed him in prison was one of those Friday nights. A stupid argument over a spilled drink, egos clashing, fists flying. Michael, fueled by cheap beer and a simmering frustration with his dead-end job, threw a punch he shouldn't have. The man fell, hit his head, and the rest was a blur of sirens, flashing lights, and the sterile smell of the police station. He remembered Sarah's face in the courtroom, pale and tear-streaked, her hand clutching his as the judge read the sentence. 7 to 15 years. It felt like a lifetime. Inside, the silence was deafening after the initial shock wore off. The noise of the cell block, the constant low hum of despair, was different from the noise of the construction site or the bar. It was heavier. He adjusted, as most men did, found the routines, the unwritten rules. He worked in the laundry, folding endless piles of rough cotton, the rhythm of the machines a constant, dull soundtrack to his days. Sarah visited every month, sometimes twice. They talked through thick glass on scratchy phones. Her voice was his only connection to the outside, to the life he'd put on hold. She never missed a visit, never complained. She told him she was working double shifts to make ends meet, that their old car had finally died, that his mother wasn't doing well. He felt useless, trapped, unable to help her. He hated the man he'd become, the burden he'd placed on her. He wrote her letters, clumsy attempts to express his regret and his love. He saved every picture she sent, every card. He believed, truly believed, that she was waiting for him, that they would pick up their life when he got out. That was his anchor. Without that belief, the years stretched out into an unbearable void. He saw other relationships crumble under the weight of incarceration, wives leaving, girlfriends moving on, families fracturing. He clung to Sarah, to their visits, to her voice, as proof that their bond was strong enough to withstand the concrete walls and the miles between them. He thought their love was different, stronger. He was wrong. The cracks started subtly, so subtly he didn't see them at first. A missed call, a shorter visit, a hurried goodbye. He attributed it to stress, to her exhaustion from working. He sent her money he earned in the laundry, little amounts that felt insignificant compared to what she was going through. He worried about her, alone in the city. He told her to find friends, to not wait around for him if it was too hard. She always brushed it off, reassured him. "I'm fine, Michael. Just keep your head down. Time goes faster than you think." He clung to those words. They were his lifeline, until the day the lifeline snapped. The package arrived 3 weeks before the escape, mailed anonymously. It contained a single item, a cheap burner phone, fully charged, tucked inside a worn paperback book, sent through the prison mail. The guards checked the book, flipped through the pages, missed the phone hidden in a hollowed-out section. Michael found it while lying on his bunk, waiting for the dinner bell. Curiosity warred with fear. Contraband meant solitary, added time. But the phone, why him? Who sent it? He waited until the lights were out, the block quiet save for the snores and coughs. He turned it on. No contact saved. No messages. He almost turned it off, tossed it. Then he saw it. A single picture in the gallery. A picture of Sarah, sitting on a park bench, laughing, her head tilted back, and beside her, a man, arm around her shoulder, his face smiling down at her. Not him, a stranger. Michael stared at the small screen, his breath catching in his throat. His first thought was that it was a friend, someone offering comfort. But the way the man was touching her, the intimacy in the pose, it didn't look like friendship. He felt a cold dread seep into his stomach. He scrolled. More pictures. Sarah and the man holding hands. Sarah and the man kissing. Pictures taken recently, in places he recognized, their neighborhood park, the diner down the street. His anchor, his lifeline, wasn't just frayed. It was gone. The world outside, the one he'd been fighting to get back to, had moved on without him. Worse, it had moved on with someone else. The rage that ignited in that moment was unlike anything he'd felt before, not even during the bar fight. It was a slow burn that quickly escalated into a roaring inferno. Betrayal. The word echoed in his mind, a hammer blow against the years of sacrifice and hope he'd clung to. He thought of her visits, her voice, her promises. All lies. Had she been seeing this man all along? Was this why she seemed distant lately? The phone had no call log, no text messages, just the pictures. A silent, brutal indictment. Who sent it? Why? Was it a cruel joke? Was someone trying to hurt him? Or was it a warning? He didn't know. He couldn't ask. Talking about the phone meant revealing he had contraband. He was alone with the images, with the crushing weight of proof. He spent the next few days and a daze, the rhythmic folding of laundry replaced by the frantic drumming of his heart. He watched Sarah during her next visit, search her face for signs of deceit. She seemed tired, distracted. She talked about a new job she'd picked up, extra shifts. Lies? Everything felt like a lie now. He couldn't bring himself to confront her. How could he? He was behind glass, helpless. He needed to know the truth, the whole truth. He needed to see her, talk to her, make her explain. The lawyer's visit came a week later. Michael had requested it, citing the need to discuss marital assets, a flimsy excuse. The lawyer, a young, uncomfortable woman, sat across from him. Mr. Jensen, she began hesitantly, your wife filed for divorce 3 weeks ago. The words hit him like a physical blow. Divorce. Filed 3 weeks ago. The timing slammed into him, just before the pictures arrived. The anonymous package wasn't a warning or a joke. It was confirmation. His wife was leaving him, had already initiated the legal process, and she was with another man. He managed to keep his face impassive, the years of prison conditioning kicking in. He listened to the lawyer explain the process, the division of their meager property, the legal timelines. His mind raced. Divorce, affair, prison. He was losing everything. The carefully constructed future, the reason for enduring the present, was dissolving before his eyes. He signed the papers the lawyer put in front of him, his hand shaking only slightly. When she left, he returned to his cell, the silence now a roaring vacuum. There was nothing left to wait for, nothing left to lose. The decision solidified in that moment, cold and sharp. He wouldn't wait for a divorce decree. He wouldn't wait for his sentence to end. He wouldn't wait for justice. He would take it. The plan wasn't complicated. Prison escapes rarely were, not the successful ones anyway. They relied on exploiting simple weaknesses, blind spots in guard patrols, faulty equipment, human complacency. Michael had seen the ventilation grate in the laundry room 100 times. It led to the outside. He'd noticed the guards rarely checked that corner thoroughly, especially on a graveyard shift. The tools were harder. A hacksaw blade, small, easily concealed. He'd traded favors, hoarded scraps as meager commissary funds, waited for the right opportunity. It took him 2 weeks. 2 weeks of working in the laundry, his mind replaying the images on the phone, the lawyer's clinical words, the forced pleasantries of Sarah's last visit. The rage was a constant companion now, a hot coal in his gut. It fueled his patience, his focus. He worked in small bursts, sawing at the metal grate, just enough to make a cut, then stopping, covering his tracks. The noise was minimal, masked by the din of machines. He used lint and dust bunnies to disguise the cuts. His hands, used to hard labor, were strong and steady. On the night of the escape, a Tuesday, the city was quiet, a soft rain falling. He finished his shift in the laundry, returned to his cell, waited for lights out. He had a small bag packed, a change of clothes he'd bartered for, some stale crackers, a bottle of water. The phone was hidden in his shoe. At precisely 4 o'clock, the shift changed. He slipped out of his bunk. The guard on duty was new, nervous, more focused on the clock than the cell block. Michael moved silently, a shadow among shadows. He reached the laundry room. The door left slightly ajar, as usual for ventilation. Inside, he worked quickly. The grate came free with a final scrape of metal. He squeezed into the dark ductwork, the air thick with humidity and the smell of bleach. It was a tight fit, his body scraping against the metal sides. He moved forward inch by painful inch, the sound of his own breathing loud in his ears. His mind was a blank slate, focused only on the physical task, the forward momentum. He ignored the fear, the claustrophobia, the voice in his head screaming that this was madness. He thought of Sarah, of the other man, of the life being stolen from him. The rage propelled him. The duct led outside, as he calculated. He emerged into the damp night air behind the maintenance shed. The perimeter fence was just yards away. He scaled it quickly, the barbed wire tearing at his clothes but not his skin. He dropped to the other side, landing softly on wet grass. Freedom. But it wasn't freedom he wanted. It was retribution. He pulled out the phone, checked the pictures again. Sarah's address was burned into his memory. He knew the bus routes, the train lines. He knew the city. He started walking, blending into the pre-dawn streets, just another figure in the rain. Except he was a ghost from the system, seeking flesh and blood answers. Back inside the prison walls, the alarm eventually sounded. The guards discovered the missing inmate. The open grate. The lockdown commenced. The search began. But Michael was already miles away, his footsteps echoing in the empty streets, a man with nothing left but a singular, burning purpose. Detective Ramirez was already on the phone, barking orders, piecing together the fragments of Michael Jensen's life, trying to understand what could turn a quiet inmate into a desperate escapee. The lawyer's visit, the divorce filing. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a terrifying picture. This wasn't a random escape. This was personal. And personal grudges, Ramirez knew, were the most dangerous kind. The anonymous package, the burner phone, that detail troubled her. Who sent it? Someone knew about the affair. Someone knew Michael was in prison. Someone deliberately decided to light this fuse. Was it just to inform him? Or was it to provoke him? The implications were chilling. Someone might have wanted this to happen. The manhunt escalated with brutal speed. Local news channels ran live feeds from outside the prison gates. Helicopters buzzed overhead, and every police car in the county was on high alert. Michael Jensen, inmate 734, was now public enemy number one, his face plastered on screens and newspapers. The narrative was simple. Dangerous convict escapes, poses threat to public safety. The nuances, the why of it all, were lost in sensationalism. He moved through the city like a wraith. He knew the back alleys, the abandoned warehouses, the places where a man could disappear. He rode buses, hopping off before they reached the terminal, walked for miles through residential streets, keeping to the shadows. He used a burner phone sparingly, turning it on only to check the stored pictures, a constant reminder of his goal. He couldn't risk making calls, couldn't risk being tracked. His destination was clear. His old neighborhood, the apartment building where he and Sarah had lived. It was a working-class area, brick buildings, corner stores, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business or thought they did. He needed to reach her, confront her, hear it from her lips. He thought about the man in the pictures. Who was he? Another guy from the neighborhood? Someone from her new job? The anger would flare, hot and blinding, at the thought of her with him, in their home, in their bed. His inner monologue was a loop of accusations, justifications, and raw pain. She promised she'd wait. She looked me in the eye. How could she? After everything. He remembered small moments, conversations, glances, reinterpreting them through the lens of betrayal. Was that why she'd seemed distant that one visit? Was that hurried goodbye a sign? He felt like a fool, a cuckold, locked away while his life was being dismantled piece by piece. He stole food from convenience stores, slept in parks, his body aching, his mind racing. He saw his face on a TV screen in a bar window, heard a commentator call him a desperate and violent man. They had no idea. They didn't know about the pictures, the divorce papers, the slow erosion of everything he held on to. Meanwhile, Detective Ramirez and her team were interviewing Sarah Jensen. She was initially tearful, seemingly distraught by Michael's escape and the potential danger he posed. She confirmed the divorce filing, admitting their marriage had been strained by his incarceration. "It was just too hard," she'd whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Years felt like forever. I told him not to wait, but he wouldn't listen." She didn't mention the affair. Not at first. Ramirez, however, had cross-referenced Sarah's phone records and financial statements. There were calls to the number that showed up repeatedly, a name attached, David Miller, and financial transactions, shared meals, movie tickets, even a rental car booked under both their names for a weekend trip a month prior. When Ramirez confronted Sarah with the evidence, the facade crumbled. Sarah broke down, admitting she had started seeing someone, David Miller. He worked with her at the diner. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she sobbed, her voice thick with confession. "He was just kind, and I was so lonely. Michael was gone, and I was just existing." She swore Michael didn't know about David. She said she hadn't told him about the divorce yet. Couldn't bring herself to do it during their visits. She planned to tell him through the lawyers. It was easier that way. She denied sending the phone or the pictures. She seemed genuinely terrified that Michael was coming for her. Ramirez looked at Sarah, seeing not a malicious antagonist, but a woman caught in an impossible situation, making choices she couldn't take back. But the cold logic of the case remained. Michael Jensen was an escaped convict, violent history, motivated by betrayal, heading towards his estranged wife and her lover. This was a potential homicide unfolding in real time. They needed to find him before he reached them. A bolo was put out for David Miller, who had also disappeared, likely worn by Sarah or simply scared. The net tightened around the neighborhood. Michael was getting closer. He could almost smell the familiar scent of his street. The tension in the city was palpable, a coiled spring waiting to snap. Everyone knew the escaped prisoner was out there. Somewhere, Michael reached his old neighborhood under the cover of a damp, early morning fog. The streets were quiet, the usual daytime bustle muted. He walked with purpose now, no longer just running but hunting. His apartment building loomed ahead, a familiar, tired brick structure on the corner. He kept a block away, watching the entrance, the windows of their second-floor unit. A patrol car cruised slowly by, its presence a stark reminder of his fugitive status. He ducked into an alley, his heart pounding. He needed to get inside, needed to confront her. He remembered the fire escape, the loose rung on the second-floor balcony they'd always meant to fix. He could climb it, get in through the back. He waited, observing, looking for any sign of movement, any indication of police presence directly on the building. He saw an elderly woman on a ground-floor balcony watering plants, a man walking a small dog. Life going on, oblivious to the storm gathering just around the corner. He pulled out the burner phone again, looking at the pictures. Sarah's laughing face, the man's arm around her. The rage flared again, hotter this time, mingled with profound sadness. They had built a life here, in this building. Shared meals at the worn kitchen table, argued on the couch, made love in the small bedroom. All of it felt like a lie now, a cruel trick. He remembered proposing to her, clumsy and nervous, on the fire escape, the city lights twinkling below. She'd said yes, her eyes shining. That memory felt like it belonged to a different person, a different lifetime. He knew she wasn't entirely to blame. Prison changed you, changed relationships. The distance, the isolation. It was a weight few bonds to bear. He knew he'd put her in a difficult position. But the betrayal, the secrecy, that felt unforgivable. He saw a light flick on in their apartment window. She was awake. Or maybe he was there. The thought sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through him. He moved out of the alley, his eyes fixed on the fire escape. He crossed the street quickly, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who had learned to navigate unseen. He reached the side of the building, grabbed the cold metal of the fire escape ladder. He started to climb, each rung a step closer to the confrontation. The air grew colder as he ascended, the fog swirling around him. He reached the second-floor balcony, the railing wobbly under his grip. He peered through the sliding glass door. The living room was dimly lit. He could see the outline of furniture, the familiar shape of the couch. He saw movement. 2 figures. On the couch. It was her. And a man. The blood rushed to his head, a roaring sound that drowned out everything else. They were there, together, in his home. All the pain, the rage, the sense of injustice coalesced into a single, burning need. He had to get in. He wrestled with the sliding door. It was locked. Of course, it was locked. He slammed his shoulder against it once, twice. The glass rattled but held. His desperation mounted. He needed to get to them. He looked around the balcony. A small planter box. He grabbed it, hefted its weight. With a guttural yell, he hurled the planter against the glass door. The glass shattered inward, a cascade of noise and splinter fragments. He climbed through the opening, cuts appearing on his hands and arms. He stumbled into the living room, breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on the couch. The figures froze, startled by the crash. They turned towards him, their faces pale in the dim light. Sarah, and the man from the pictures. The moment hung suspended, a tableau of shock and raw emotion. Michael? Sarah's voice was a whisper, laced with terror. The man stood up, stepping in front of her protectively. It was David Miller. The climax had arrived. The air crackled with tension. Broken glass lay scattered on the floor, reflecting the dim light filtering in from the shattered door. Michael stood just inside the room, bleeding from small cuts, his clothes torn, his eyes fixed on Sarah and the man standing in front of her. It was David Miller, just as the police had suspected. He was average height, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses, not the hulking figure Michael might have imagined in his jealous fantasies. He looked terrified. Sarah was behind him, her face a mask of shock and fear, her hand clutching David's arm. "Michael, how?" she stammered, her voice trembling. Michael didn't answer immediately. He just stared, taking in the scene, the reality of his betrayal laid bare. The rage that had fueled his escape, his journey, felt different now. It was still there, but it was mixed with profound, heartbreaking emptiness. This was it, the moment he'd risked everything for. And now that he was here, he didn't know what to do. He had envisioned violence, confrontation, maybe even revenge. But seeing him like this, so real, so ordinary in the wreckage of his life, stole the air from his lungs. You filed for divorce?" Michael's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Sarah flinched. "Michael, I was going to tell you. Through the lawyers. It was too hard. Too hard." His voice gained strength, rising in accusation. "What about this, Sarah? Was this too hard, too?" He gestured wildly towards David. David spoke, his voice shaky but steady. "Look, Michael, I didn't know she was married when we met. By the time I found out, things were complicated. I never wanted to hurt anyone." "You didn't want to hurt anyone?" Michael laughed, a dry, humorless sound that scraped against the silence. "I'm in prison, serving time for trying to protect what I had, and you're in my home, with my wife, while she's divorcing me behind my back. You think that doesn't hurt?" Sarah stepped out from behind David. Her face was streaked with tears. "Michael, please. It wasn't like that. I was lonely. I made a mistake. I know it was wrong. But you were gone. For years. How was I supposed to?" "You were supposed to wait," he roared, the suppressed rage finally breaking through. "You were supposed to be my wife. You were supposed to be here when I got out. And when would that be, Michael?" Her voice rose, matching his intensity, the fear momentarily giving way to a desperate self-preservation. 7 years? 10? 15? Did you ever think about what that would do to me? To us? The raw, brutal honesty of her question hung in the air. He hadn't thought about it, not in that way. He'd been so focused on his own pain, his own incarceration, that he hadn't fully grasped the reality of her life outside, the years stretching out ahead of her without him. "The pictures," Michael said, his voice low again. "Who sent them?" Sarah and David exchanged a quick, panicked glance. "We don't know," David said quickly. "We got copies too. They were left in our mailboxes, anonymous." Michael stared at them. Was it possible? Someone else knew? Someone wanted this chaos. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't the only player in this drama. There was a hidden hand, pulling the strings, watching all unfold. Before he could process the implications, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing rapidly louder. The police were here. Someone had called them. Probably a neighbor, woken by the sound of breaking glass. David moved instinctively toward the phone on the wall. "No!" Michael yelled, lunging forward. David flinched back. Sarah screamed. In the scramble, Michael saw the phone receiver, saw the opportunity. Not to call, but to destroy. He grabbed a heavy glass vase from a nearby table and swung it, not at them, but at the wall phone. It shattered against the plaster. Sparks flying, the line going dead. The sirens were just outside now, flashing blue and red lights reflected through the windows. "Michael, it's over," Sarah pleaded, her voice breaking. "Just give yourself up." He looked at her, at David, at the ruined apartment, the shattered glass, the dead phone line. His escape, the desperate journey, the confrontation, it had all led to this. Not revenge, not resolution, but this messy, painful, public end. He heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. The door to the apartment burst open. Police officers, guns drawn, flooded the room. "Police, drop your weapon. Hands where I can see them." Michael stood amidst the wreckage of his life, holding the broken vase, the pictures on the discarded phone screen still visible on the floor. He looked from Sarah to David, then to the armed officers surrounding him. There was nowhere left to run. The apartment building swarmed with uniforms. Crime scene tape went up, marking off the perimeter. Neighbors peered from their doors and windows, whispering, their faces a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. Michael Jensen, the escaped convict, was apprehended without further struggle. He dropped the broken vase, raised his hands, and was quickly taken into custody. Sarah and David were questioned separately. Their stories corroborated events inside the apartment. The breaking glass, the confrontation, the arrival of police. They maintained they had no idea who sent the photos or why. Detective Ramirez arrived on the scene, assessing the chaos. The broken glass. The tension still thick in the air. She looked at Sarah Jensen, wrapped in a blanket, talking to a uniformed officer, her face etched with exhaustion and residual fear. Then she looked at David Miller, visibly shaken, being led out of the building for further questioning. And finally, she looked at Michael Jensen handcuffed, sitting in the back of a patrol car, his face expressionless as he stared out at the flashing lights. The story that unfolded was complex and deeply human. Michael's rage, fueled by perceived betrayal and the brutal isolation of prison. Sarah's desperation for connection and a life outside the confines of his sentence. David's entanglement in a situation he didn't fully understand. But the anonymous package remained a troubling loose end. Who sent it and why? Ramirez assigned officers to track down the origin of the package, the burner phone, postal records, surveillance footage from near the post office. Painstaking work that might lead nowhere. Rumors flew through the neighborhood, amplified by the relentless media coverage. Some said Sarah had orchestrated the whole thing to get rid of Michael. Others blamed David, calling him a homewrecker. Some even speculated Michael's escape was part of a larger criminal conspiracy, the affair just a cover story. The media, in an insatiable hunger for a simple narrative, latched onto the love triangle turned violent escape angle. Michael was portrayed as a dangerous, jealous monster, Sarah as a victim, and David as the innocent third party caught in the middle. The reality, as always, was far messier. In his interrogation, Michael spoke haltingly, his voice flat, devoid of the earlier rage. He recounted receiving the package, seeing the photos, the lawyer's visit. He admitted to planning the escape, his sole motivation being to confront Sarah. He hadn't intended to hurt anyone, he claimed, just to make her explain. But the vase? The shattered glass? He couldn't explain it, not rationally. It was just a reaction, the culmination of years of pain and the final straw of betrayal. He didn't know who sent the package. He couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt him or Sarah this way. In a separate room, Sarah was questioned again. She admitted the affair had started months ago. She felt trapped, alone. She defended David, saying he was a good man who genuinely cared for her. She expressed remorse for lying to Michael for the pain she had caused, but she reiterated her fear when he broke in, her terror that he might harm them. David, in his interview, described his relationship with Sarah, the gradual deepening of their connection. He knew about Michael being in prison, but Sarah had told him the marriage was effectively over, just a formality waiting for his release. He hadn't expected Michael to escape. He was scared, confused, regretful that he had become part of such a destructive situation. The picture emerging was one of flawed people making difficult choices under immense pressure, culminating in a dramatic public breakdown. But the question of the anonymous package gnawed at Ramirez. It felt too deliberate, too perfectly timed. It wasn't just a consequence. It was a catalyst. Someone had wanted Michael to know. Someone had wanted this confrontation. Days turned into weeks. Michael was back in custody, facing new charges: escape, breaking and entering, criminal damage. His previous sentence felt insignificant now, compared to potential time he was looking at. He was held in a different facility, maximum security this time. The quiet inmate was gone, replaced by the infamous escapee, the subject of endless news cycles and true crime podcasts. His face, once just mugshot, was now a symbol of betrayal and desperation. Detective Ramirez and her team continued to investigate the anonymous package. They tracked the burner phone. It was purchased with cash at a prepaid store weeks before the escape. The postal package was harder to trace. No return address, generic packaging. Surveillance footage from the post office was grainy, showing only a hooded figure dropping the package in the mail slot late at night. A dead end, or so it seemed. Then, a break. An inmate in Michael's previous facility came forward. A snitch looking for a reduced sentence. He claimed to have overheard conversations between two other inmates weeks before Michael's escape. They were talking about Jensen, about his wife. They seemed to know about the affair, and they talked about sending him something, not out of malice, but out of a twisted sense of camaraderie, a desire to warn him, to give him a chance to do something about it. They were Michael's cell block neighbors, petty criminals serving time for minor offenses. When questioned, they initially denied everything, but faced with the snitch's testimony and the evidence of the anonymous package, they eventually cracked. They had seen Sarah talking to David during her visits, sometimes in the parking lot before or after. They had connections on the outside, people who could follow Sarah, take pictures. They'd heard snippets of gossip about her having a new man. They felt sorry for Michael, quiet Jensen, who kept his head down and seemed genuinely devoted to his wife. It was a misguided, reckless attempt to help, to expose the truth as they saw it. They found a way to get the pictures and the phone to him, slipping it into a package from the prison library they knew wouldn't be thoroughly searched. They never expected him to escape. They just wanted him to know. The twist was both anticlimactic and devastating. Not a mastermind villain, but a couple of low-level cons with a twisted sense of justice and too much time on their hands. Their interference, born of misguided empathy or simply boredom, had lit the fuse on Michael's life. Meanwhile, Sarah and David struggled to rebuild their lives under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. David lost his job at the diner. Sarah was harassed online and in person. They were the subject of gossip, speculation, and judgment. Their relationship, forged in secrecy and loneliness, now had to withstand the crushing weight of public shame. Sarah visited Michael once more, this time in the new, sterile visiting room. The glass was thicker, the security tighter. She looked different, older, the weariness she'd carried before now etched into deep lines around her eyes. She told him about the inmate confession, about who sent the package. Michael listened, his face impassive. It didn't change anything, not really. It was still the truth. The truth had just been delivered by different hands than he imagined. He looked at her, sitting across from him, the woman he had loved, the woman he had escaped prison for. He saw not the betrayer he had envisioned in his rage, but a woman who had broken under the weight of his absence, her own loneliness, and the relentless passage of time. He saw the choices she had made, choices born of weakness, not malice. And he saw his own choices, the path that had led him from a bar fight to the sterile room, this new set of charges, this final, irreversible break. There was no grand reconciliation, no outpouring of emotion, just a quiet acknowledgement of the wreckage they had created together. The trial for Michael Jensen's escape and related charges was swift and brutal. The media circus surrounding the case ensured packed courtrooms and nonstop coverage. The prosecution painted a picture of a violent offender driven by jealous rage, posing a clear danger to society. They highlighted his original conviction, the premeditation of the escape, the broken glass, the terror Sarah and David experienced. Michael's defense attempted to present him as a man pushed to the breaking point, driven mad by betrayal and the unique psychological toll of incarceration. They brought in the story of the anonymous package, arguing it was a deliberate provocation that triggered his actions. They called Sarah to testify. She recounted the events in the apartment, her fear, her admission of the affair. Under cross-examination, her vulnerability was exposed, her past choices dissected and judged by lawyers and the public alike. David also testified, recounting his perspective, his fear, his regret. The anonymous package was presented as a key piece of evidence, a complicating factor that shifted some of the focus away from Michael's inherent criminality towards the external forces that influence his actions. But the jury saw the escape, the broken glass, the fear on Sarah's face on the night of the incident. They heard the cold facts of a man breaking out of prison and breaking into his estranged wife's home. The motive, while explained, didn't excuse the actions. Michael was found guilty on all counts. The judge, citing the severity of the escape and the potential for violence, handed down a significant sentence, adding years to his existing time. The minimum 7 years he was originally serving now felt like a distant, almost nostalgic memory. The final fallout was quiet, a slow, painful settling of dust. Sarah and David's relationship didn't survive the public scrutiny and the emotional trauma. They drifted apart, unable to escape the shadow of the escape and the trial. Sarah moved out of the old neighborhood, trying to start fresh elsewhere, but the story followed her, a digital ghost clinging to her name. David also left the city, seeking anonymity. The inmates who sent the package received minor disciplinary action within the prison system. Their motivation deemed misguided but not criminal enough for outside charges. They were just footnotes in the larger tragedy. Michael Jensen returned to prison, this time to a higher security level. His life now reduced to the confines of concrete and steel, the faces of guards, the hollow echo of his own footsteps. He was no longer the quiet inmate. He was the infamous escapee, the man who crawled through ducts for love and rage. His story became a cautionary tale, discussed in hushed tones in cell blocks and debated on true crime forums. It was a story about the corrosive nature of secrets, the impossible strain of separation, and the devastating consequences of choices made in desperation and anger. It was a story about how quickly a life can unravel, how easily betrayal can ignite a firestorm, and how sometimes the greatest tragedy isn't the crime itself, but the slow, agonizing loss of everything that ever mattered. The image that lingered for Detective Ramirez wasn't a sensational headline, but the look on Michael Jensen's face in patrol car, the quiet devastation that seemed to say he had lost more than just his freedom that night. He had lost his past, his present, and any hope for a future. The truth was messy, complex, and ultimately heartbreakingly simple. A man, a woman, a secret, and a life destroyed by the desire to uncover it. Michael's days in the maximum security facility settled into a new, harsher routine. The noise here was different, sharper, more volatile. The guards were tougher, the rules stricter. He was a known quantity now, not just inmate 734, but Jensen, the escapee. Other prisoners looked at him with a mix of curiosity and wary respect. He became a legend of sorts, the guy who did the impossible, who broke out fueled by something more personal than just wanting freedom. But there was no pride in it, only a heavy, crushing regret. His hands still bore faint scars from the broken glass, a physical reminder the night everything splintered apart. He rarely spoke now, even less than before. He worked in the new prison industry job he was assigned, repetitive, mind-numbing labor that filled the hours but did nothing to quiet the thoughts in his head. He saw Sarah's face sometimes in his dreams, not the terrified face in the apartment, but the one from their wedding day, full of hope and promise. He wondered about her, about David. He knew their story was over, that his escape had been the final nail in the coffin of their brief, ill-fated connection. He hoped in a distant, detached way that they were okay, that they could somehow move past the wreckage he had caused. But he knew, deep down, that some things couldn't be fixed. The anonymous package remained a dark, unsettling symbol. He knew now who had sent it, but understanding their misguided motive didn't erase the fact that someone had deliberately exposed his wife's betrayal, knowing potential for chaos. It was an act of malicious intent, even if the perpetrators claimed it was a misguided attempt at help. It highlighted the dark underbelly of gossip and interference, how easily idle talk and reckless actions could devastate lives. The media attention eventually waned, replaced by the next sensational headline. His story became another entry in the endless archive of true crime narratives, dissected, debated, and ultimately filed away. But for Michael, the story was far from over. He lived it every day, in the silence of his cell, in the endless monotony of prison life. He thought about the irony of it all. He had been sent to prison for a stupid fight, for lashing out in anger. He had become a model inmate, trying to earn his way back to a life that no longer existed. And then, confronted with the ultimate betrayal, he had lashed out again, in a far more destructive, desperate way, ensuring he would never return. He was trapped in a cycle of his own making, fueled by rage, loss, and the inability to confront pain head-on. He sometimes wondered what would have happened if he hadn't gotten the package, if he hadn't known about the affair and the divorce until he got out. Would Sarah have told him? Would they have tried to work through it? Or would it have ended anyway? A slow, quiet dissolution? He would never know. The what-ifs were another form of torture, another set of bars on his cell. He had traded one prison for another, a metaphorical one for a literal one. Except now the walls were thicker, the sentence longer, and the hope almost entirely extinguished. The system had contained him physically, but the real prison was in his mind, a landscape of regret and lost possibilities. The city outside moved on, its rhythm unbroken by the small, human tragedies unfolding within its walls. New buildings went up, old ones were torn down. People fell in love, fell out of love, made mistakes, faced consequences. Michael Jensen was just one story among millions, a cautionary tale whispering corners, a reminder of how quickly a life can descend into chaos, how fragile trust can be, and how the things we hold on to the tightest can sometimes be the very things that destroy us. His escape wasn't a bid for freedom. It was a desperate, tragic sprint toward the truth, a truth that ultimately offered no absolution, only devastation. The tale of Michael Jensen, prisoner 734, became less about a dramatic escape and more about the slow, agonizing death of a marriage, a family, and a man's hope, played out under the unforgiving glare of the urban landscape and the viral eye of the world.